Hey, how's it going? When suppressing a 9mm firearm, a lot of people don't realize the impact your ammo selection has on sound. I myself really didn't get it until I picked up a box of S&B 150 grain subs and a box of Ammo Incorporated 165 grain subs. Up until this point, the only Subsonic 9mm ammunition I had shot was 147 grain CCI Blazer brass. 147 grain Blazer brass, at least at the current time, can be found for about 25 cents to 30 cents a round, and is easy to find. It's very available. It's not particularly quiet though. From blowback 9mm, the port pop causes slight ringing in my right ear, and from a Browning action handgun, it's still not very pleasant to run without ear pro, both of these suppressed. That same Browning action handgun with the slide lock though, is actually pretty quiet. That is despite only having a 4.5 inch barrel. Compare that to the S&B 150 grain and the Ammo Inc. 165 grain and, well, just listen.
This is 147. Still, because of the port pop, even in my left ear, that's still a little loud. But, that was a 147. 150. That was quieter. 165. There's a there. Back to back. That is easily you can easily tell that difference to the ear. I don't know if you can via audio or via this audio, but that is a significant difference. You're right to back. Right back to back. That wasn't fast enough.
Despite the 147 grains being quiet, the 150s and 165s are undoubtedly quieter. But before going over boring nerdy shit, we need to go over some other boring nerdy shit. For the uninitiated, when shooting suppressed firearms, it's desirable, at least when it comes to hearing safety, to fire subsonic projectiles. That is, projectiles traveling slower than the speed of sound. Projectiles that break the sound barrier produce a sharp crack as they travel through the air, and are pretty loud even if the gunshot itself is well muffled. Shooting subs means the projectiles will be much harder to hear both for you, the shooter, and for your hypothetical target, if you're in that kind of situation. Also due to how projectiles behave, if you shoot a supersonic projectile, you generally never want it to become transonic. No, that's not a new Sonic the Hedgehog OC. Transonic meaning it's slowed down to below the speed of sound. Then you run into a whole lot of other issues, but that's not the focus of this video. The speed of sound changes depending on a bunch of variables such as elevation, temperature, and atmospheric pressure. It's complicated as shit, and my only technical knowledge is on firearms and computers, so I'm not even going to attempt to explain that. But a good rule of thumb is that you want your projectile to be slower than 1100 feet per second. If you happen to find yourself at the top of Mount Everest at 29,000 feet above sea level, in a firefight shooting subsonics, you will want your projectiles to remain slower than 990 feet per second. Though I doubt most people will be in that situation. Anyways, back to 9mm and potentially, cartridges as a whole. The question is, are the heavier projectiles quieter simply due to the projectile weight, manufacture, i.e. brand of powder and primer used, and powder charge, or both? It seems that both are a factor, but generally speaking, the higher the projectile mass, the quieter the shot. To put this to the test, I would need to grab some S&B 140 grain subsonics to confirm with my S&B 150s, but at least from what I've heard from others' experiences, more often than not, it's subsonic, the heavier, the quieter. Also, cartridges with heavier projectiles tend to be loaded with less powder. I'm not a reloader, yet, but I know that there are two common methods of adding mass to a projectile. One method we can see with the CCI and S&B subs using a flat-nosed projectile. The flat nose, of course, adds mass compared to the traditionally shaped projectile. This can cause feeding issues in some weapons though, like I've heard on MP5s, they do not like flat-nosed projectiles most of the time. In order to keep the powder pack tight, you need more powder than you would with another method. Not sure what it's technically called, but I'll say extending the rear of the projectile. A longer ass on a bullet means it will take up more space in the cartridge, meaning you can add less powder while still having the powder that's in there be tightly packed. And of course, less powder means a quieter shot. Just look at this example from Extreme Bullets. The 165 grains are noticeably longer than the 115s. Some companies also add inert powder filler to the cartridges to keep the same compression rate with the powder, but usually not done with pistol calibers, it's usually done with 300 blackout and stuff like that. I believe the Ammo Incorporated 165 grains are using the extended bullet method to get their sound performance, and it certainly seems to work. Another lesser factor with projectile shape is how aerodynamic they are. Less aerodynamic projectiles, like the flat noses on the 147 and 150 grains, tend to make more noise when cutting through the air. That isn't something you're going to notice as the shooter, that's something your target would. There's also the benefit that a heavier projectile is going to deliver more energy on target than a lighter projectile traveling at the same speed. I hate math more than I hate scam callers, but doing a little bit of the devil's number game, we can demonstrate this. A 115 grain projectile traveling at 800 feet per second, which is handily subsonic at any elevation and at any atmospheric conditions, will deliver about 163 foot-pounds of energy to the target. Up the mast to 165 grain, and keeping the same velocity of 800 feet per second, our energy goes from 163 foot-pounds to 233 foot-pounds. A pretty significant increase in energy on target. Definitely not 1-to-1, since 115 grain projectiles are almost always going supersonic, and velocity contributes to energy more than mass does, but I wanted to demonstrate that going heavy has its benefits. Heavier projectiles are also deflected by wind and brush less, making them potentially more accurate at longer ranges. Just need to account for the additional bullet drop you'll experience. Heavier projectiles also tend to be better at barrier penetration, potentially a good or bad thing, depending on your application. Okay, enough nerd shit. Here's some more shooting, alternating ammunition types.
Nice. Okay. First, 147. 150. 165. Damn. 147. 150. 165. Even on this, there's a significant difference. Oh, that still got me. Try to hit that target. Oh. An interesting failure. It locked back before empty because this round popped out prematurely. That's a 165. Nice.
Some might ask, why not just load the cartridge so your projectile will just be edging, giggity, the speed of sound, giving it the greatest possible energy while still remaining subsonic? Few problems with that one. One, even with the most precise hand loader making your cartridges, modern propellant powder simply isn't super consistent. Extreme precision shooters generally consider an extreme spread of 35 feet per second to be pretty good, and that's for expensive match ammunition. What I mean by this is you'll have trouble edging the speed of sound without occasionally breaking the sound barrier, which kinda defeats the purpose of subsonic ammo. Second issue is with how the speed of sound changes depending on many variables, depending on where you are, when you are, what temperature it is, etc. Your subsonics might be going a little faster than intended. Again, this defeats the purpose of subsonic ammunition. Now, I've only tried a few types of subsonic ammunition, and want to do more extensive testing in the future, comparing every brand and projectile weight I can get my hands on, but that's going to have to wait. Since panic buying has started again recently, because people are at least seeming to be incapable of putting away a box of ammo every time they buy, just so they have a little bit stockpiled. Oh my god. Don't panic buy, people. It just causes the prices to rise more, causing more people to panic buy, and waste more money, and the cycle just continues. Anyway, enough of that. Now for the big question. Is getting more expensive subsonic ammunition worth it? For me, not really. At least not really if we're talking about just range practice. The 147s are about half the price of the 165s, and the 165s are maybe 10 to 20% quieter at my ear. Keep in mind, I do have pretty well preserved hearing, but still. Without a firearm-specific decibel reader, I can't say for sure just how quiet it is, but I can tell you damn sure it's not half as loud. If you make six figures or just have a shit ton of disposable income, go for it. If money is no object, absolutely the 165 grains are better. But I'm just a lowly security guard and don't make enough to justify spending 60 cents a round on 9mm range ammunition. But who knows? Maybe there's a subsonic load of 9mm out there that is stupid quiet, even in a blowback, and is worth the markup, at least for me. Only time will tell. But really, a noticeable but not significant difference in decibels matters far less than training. Go to the range and get some fucking exercise. And take care.